Welcome to the Positively No Gambling Podcast, the pro football show that is definitely not about betting. My name is Glenn Fraser. It is Saturday, August 16th, and this is the 2025 team preview for the Kansas City Chiefs. Fun one. Obviously, the Chiefs are the Super Bowl runner-up, won two of the last three Super Bowls, been to what, five of the last six Super Bowls? Just an incredible run they're going on. So format, we're going to ask two big questions from the start of the offseason, recap 2024, overview 2025, look at some trends, stats, look at headlines, conclude on those big questions, and give out a preliminary over/under pick. The final over/under picks for season totals will be part of the conference previews at the right before the beginning of the season. So let's dive into the questions for the Chiefs. Basically, all revolve around the offense and is did they add enough weapons and did they fix the O-line? This picture kind of sums up their Super Bowl. Mahomes was running for his life. The defensive front and pass rushers for the Eagles were just way, way, way too much. And that's if you could sum up why they got their asses kicked in the Super Bowl, it's that. And the O line is the primary concern for the 2025 season. So with that, let's recap 24. This was one of the most remarkable um, regular seasons that I could remember. 15-2, and that two really is a one because the final game was they didn't play one starter. They finished first in the AFC West. Obviously, they got a first round bye, lost to the Eagles in the Super Bowl. 9-0, just a blazing hot start. Only real loss was to Buffalo in Buffalo. We remember that one. 7-1 versus playoff teams, 7-2 technically with that Denver loss at the end. They had a pretty easy schedule, which is part of the reason why they won so many games. But the other reason is their Pythagorean expectation versus their actual wins. They overachieved, if you will, by almost five full wins, which is the highest that I could remember since they've been tracking this type of stuff, which is going on 30 plus years now. Uh, if we remember, I could point out those five wins quickly. And there's even more, to be honest with you. Baltimore, Cincinnati, Atlanta, Denver, Vegas, all of those games ended with a Chiefs victory, but easily could have been the reversal. The 11-0 in one score games, that streak we know spans over a year and is absolutely remarkable. It's remarkable that they're winning all of these games, but they're the Chiefs. They're the best team in football over the last 5 years. Overviewing the 2025 offense, in terms of departures, nothing. I mean, they lost Joe Thuney to the Bears, who we highlighted as one of their key additions. So that's that's a loss for sure. D Hop to Baltimore, McCole Hardman to the Packers, P Ryan to Cincinnati. None of those were major losses. In terms of what they've added, they went heavy on trying to rebuild this offensive line on the fly. They took a free agent shot at Jalen Moore, who came in limited starting time last year with the Niners, but did look pretty good. They drafted Josh Simmons, which so far is looking like a tremendous draft pick. Elijah Mitchell, kind of a maybe underrated signing. He never really panned out with the Niners, but he's got a lot of talent. And I think in this offense, not having to be the every down back, he could offer just a little bit of a change up that could just make this offense a little bit more dynamic. Beyond that, not a ton of additions, but the one big return will be Rashee Rice. And obviously, he's got some issues that he's dealing with, probably will be suspended for part of this season, but he is a very good receiver, and getting him back will be key to turning this offense maybe back into um, a dynamic one because if we look back to the recap, they were a middling offense at best, only scoring 23 points a game. That is not the type of blueprint that you want out of an Andy Reid led offense, but it didn't matter. It really didn't matter. They certainly didn't lose the Super Bowl because of their offensive weapons. They lost it because of their offensive line and just how dominant Philly was. Okay, so back to the offensive overview. In terms of blue chippers, obviously Mahomes, Creed Humphreys, an excellent center, and Kelsey, even if he's on the backside of his career and probably will never have the type of offensive season that he's had in the past. He's still a very good blocker, and he's Travis Kelsey. You can't ignore him when he's out there. In terms of high potential, Rashee Rice, Jalen Moore, I'll even throw in Josh Simmons there. X factors are going to be these tackles and Rashee Rice. Um, Obviously, not a make or break. This is Mahomes and the Chiefs. So I like the tackles. I think Rashee Rice coming back is big. So what's kind of scary for the NFL is this offense looks a lot better than it did last year, and we will monitor how they gel and how they perform and how they deal with injuries. Defense, not a ton of changes. They lost a safety, Justin Reid, to the Saints. Lost an edge, Josh Uche, backup edge, sort of rotational guy to Philly. They added only one, I guess, projected starter, Kristen Fulton, coming over from the Chargers, and drafted Omar Norman Lott, who is uh, projected to be probably a rotational down lineman. They drafted Noel Williams, not a ton of new faces, but they really don't need it given how great this defense has been in the past couple of seasons. Blue chippers, Chris Jones for sure, Trent McDuffie for sure. Karlaftis is one of those tweeners. He's definitely a top talent along with Leo Chanel and Jalen Watson, who is potentially going to start, definitely will contribute in nickel and dime packages, etc. The X factor, the only one I could really come up with is if these new cornerbacks can't perform up to and above the sort of average cornerback, that could make their secondary a little bit vulnerable. But if they do overperform, that could make their secondary dominant, given how good McDuffie is. I don't expect anything less than a top defense out of this unit. Again, this year, they've earned that reputation. Look at the 25 schedule. So one thing jumps right out at us, right? Very similar to the Bills. They've got a very tough home schedule. They're the Chiefs. They can't avoid playing the great teams, but this year, they're all their tough games except Buffalo seem to be at home, which is interesting when we're thinking about over-unders, right? So they've got Philly, Baltimore, Detroit, Washington, Houston. These are all top teams. They got them all at home. At Buffalo week 9, that seriously could be for home field advantage, even though it's only in week 9. And another observation is just given this division, given where they finished, it's not that bad of a schedule, honestly, which is more Chiefs luck. I mean, it's not any kind of conspiracy. It's just the way the schedule pans out. Now, look, some of these road games could end up being more difficult than it looks in August, but it just visually, when I look at this, I am thinking, boy, the Chiefs are going to win a lot of these road games, even week 1. That's a neutral site. Week 3 in New York to play the Giants. Now it's after the big Eagles game, whatever, and it's before a Baltimore game. It could be somewhat of a trap game, but are we really thinking they're going to lose to the Giants? No. Very similar with the Jaguars. It's sandwiched in between the Ravens and the Lions, but It's the Chiefs versus the Jaguars. I can't imagine them blowing that one. Uh, so that's where you land with the Chiefs in terms of their schedule. Tougher than last year on paper, but they really should be able to rack up wins on the road. And even though the home schedule is brutal, you're playing these teams in Arrowhead, which is one of the more advantageous stadiums in football. Some of the sort of Barnwell stats here. This is like if you're only looking at this from a statistical standpoint, you almost blindly should take a Chiefs under for their win totals because every single stat, every single indicator tells us that they're going to fall back from last year without a doubt. Right? We talked about the Pythagorean wins. They only had 10.2 versus a 15 actual wins. They were 11 and 0, famously. Pretty good fumble differential, which usually slides back. Their win increase from 2023 to even though this 2023 team was a Super Bowl winner, they won four more games in 2024. That will revert without a doubt. Nothing jumps out crazy with the schedule. We talked about the O line, how bad they are at pass protection or were last year. So that will have to improve. Um, in terms of the look ahead lines, I like them a lot right now at home against the Eagles. I know the Eagles dominated them, but this is 2025. It's only going to be in week two. It's at home and it's a pick 'em right now. I mean, you never see pick 'em, so that will settle somewhere. Probably Chiefs by 1.5, 2.5, depending on what happens in the week one opening games. Both teams are going to have a little bit of a rest advantage here. It's so early in the season. Weather shouldn't be a factor. I just think they get up and win that game. Another one, week 12, Colts. I'm way down on. They're only an 8.5 point favorite. By the time they play this game, this could be 12 and a half, 11 and a half. I think you're getting good value here. But that's really it because they're a public team and there's usually not a ton of value on Kansas City. Um, and we talked about it. There are so many indicators of a real regression here that takes them from 15 wins back down to 10 or 11. So an under here for the Chiefs is not a awful play. But most of those tough games are at Arrowhead, and they might be the Brady Patriots. They might be regression proof, and none of these stats really matter when you're looking at year to year changes. Which leads to the conclusion and the pick. Do I think they answered their key offseason questions regarding offensive weapons? Even though they didn't add a ton of offensive weapons, getting Rashee Rice back, getting a getting some new tackles should make this offense better. I don't think they're 30 points a game better, but I think they're definitely going to be improved versus last year. So I definitely think that they answered that question. And the tackles, the linemen, looks like they hit. Looks like they hit on at least one of those guys. So that should be a big improvement versus last year. So I'm going to go reluctantly over. 11 and a half is a ton, but I feel like the schedule and the roster will allow them to win at least 12 games. But all these signs are pointing towards regression. A stay away is probably the play. I can't get too comfortable taking an under with the Chiefs, not with this roster and with this schedule. Um, and frankly, they will regress, and they can regress by three games, and you're still going to hit this over. They could go from 15 to 12 wins, and that's a step backwards in terms of wins from last season, but that still should be good enough to win the division, should be good enough to uh, make the playoffs, obviously, and will put them in a position to return to the Super Bowl, which is never a bad pick. So I'm going to go over. It's definitely a reluctant one, but I'm going to take the over on the Chiefs. They're the same old Chiefs. I don't see any serious regression here. Very boring pick. I get that, but I cannot really advise anything other than a stay away. If you're going to play it, play the over. Um, and that wraps up the Chiefs preview. So tomorrow we'll do the Las Vegas Raiders, who are a very interesting case study for 2025, given all the changes that happened in their offseason. So with that, we'll end for today, and we'll see you tomorrow for the Raiders.